So good evening, everybody. Some of you who are not your first-time visitors know me well, but if you're a first-time visitor, welcome. We're so excited to have you. My name is Laura Sears, just at the department store, and I am your public programs coordinator here at the First Division Museum. Our Date with History series is a very popular series. We've been hosting it for going on 10 years now. We are excited this year to be able to present this virtually, so we do not stop the presentations. And before we get started with our speaker, I wanted to give everybody just a couple of housekeeping rules. Virtual is very different than when we host this program in person. So since we are virtual this evening, if you would like to participate in our question and answer session, that will happen at the very end of this presentation. So about 15 minutes towards the end, we'll get started with Krista. Is happy to answer questions. And you can get those questions to us by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a button that says Q&A, has little talking bubbles on it. You can go ahead and click on that and type in your questions for us. I will do my best to get to as many questions as possible. If we run out of time, you can go ahead and email me questions. I'm always happy to kind of send them off to Chris, and I'm sure he'll be able to get back to you if we run out of time this evening.
Certainly.
Absolutely. That being said, let's introduce our speaker this evening. So everybody, please join me in virtually welcoming Kristopher Battles. He is a contemporary fine artist, originally served as a Marine reservist from 1986 until 1996. Battles became a Marine combat artist after re-enlisting in 2006 and deployed to overseas contingency operations several times to create art for the United States Marine Corps, serving in that billet until 2014. From 2014 to 2019, Battles served as a civilian combat artist for the Naval History and Heritage Command at the Navy Yard in Washington, D.C. Battles is currently the Marine Corps' artist in residence and is on staff at the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Quantico, Virginia. Welcome. We are so excited to have you. And may I say, I know we are an Army museum, but a resounding hoorah this evening.
Yeah.
Let's go on.
Hoorah. I should say hooah.
Yeah,
Hooah.
hooah.
Is that what you said?
All right, Kristopher.
That's awesome.
The floor is yours. Enjoy.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. I can't see all of your smiling faces, but I thank you that you're here. So I'm just going to explain a little bit about what I am, and what I do, and what combat art is, and a little bit about the Marine Corps Combat Art Collection. I will also be sharing a little bit about combat art in general, which will include some Army art from World War II era. So my name is Kristopher Battles. I am the Marine Corps' artist in residence. Let's see if I can get this to work here. Aha. So let me tell you about the beginnings of the program. Our beginnings started, actually, we kind of go back to the middle of the 1800s, but as far as Marine Corps combat art in modern combat, it goes back to World War I. And Lieutenant John Thomason was a Marine officer. He served in Belleau Wood in several battles. After that, he was decorated with the Silver Star. He was an infantry officer, was wounded in combat, but he drew continuously while he was overseas, and later wrote a famous book called Fixed Bayonets, and was an actual successful published author in with books and in magazine articles. So he just was very prolific as a writer and as an artist. So he's kind of our founding father. The Marine Corps Combat Art Program in its first real iteration was in 1942. When the war kicked up in 1941, they decided that they wanted to follow the model from World War II, as well as by having artists sent, because the Army had a wonderful set of 8 illustrators that went over, and the Marine Corps had various artists, of course, as you saw in World War I as well, but they wanted to formalize it. So in 1942, they brought General Denig, Robert Denig, back from active duty, or put him on active duty back from retirement. And so he became the first public affairs commanding officer. And so he enlisted photojournalists and artists and photographers. And so I've got one quote. Most of this will be pictures, so bear with me, but I'll read this to you. Art at any time is food for spiritual growth. The centuries have proved it so. At peace or at war, man cannot live by bread alone. A special case for art in time of war may be made, for it is then that man's spiritual as well as physical being is most severely in need of sustaining strength. Whatever provides the people good cheer, material for reflection and inspiration is an essential contribution to a nation's total effort. This is a people's war. The people want to know, need to know, and have a right to know what is going on. So the combat artist himself, what is a combat artist? It's sort of an anachronism. something from way past, since we have photographers nowadays. So let me explain exactly what a combat artist is. He's kind of a prophet and a poet, a visual poet. He's a chronicler. I used to go out with historians when I was overseas, and they would interview and collect histories, and I would sketch. We're a visual voice of the troops. We tell their story visually, and sometimes images can be very powerful. We sort of build morale as well. It's very one of the best things that we have happen is when we're sitting there sketching a young Marine or sailor. That person suddenly feels very important that the United States government would send somebody to sit with them and sketch them and to tell the story of what they do. And this story, these artworks will last for hundreds of years. And we're also risk takers for our country and our craft. Most artists don't sort of go in harm's way to do their craft, but combat artists do. So we've got the task of going to war and doing art. That's been our motto ever since World War II. So we're about experiencing it and then interpreting it visually. So we're not just to be getting it from secondary sources. We're supposed to go out, feel what they feel, like a journalist, like a combat journalist in a sense, correspondent, go out, experience it, and then interpret it visually and take that story back. There's no restrictions on our content. Even the Marine Corps does not say, well, we need this and you can't draw that, except for certain things regarding the Geneva Conventions that you can't do images of. We have no restrictions on what our content is. We're not here to do propaganda. We're here to actually just create the best images which will chronicle and show what's going on. Because it's not just for the Marines there, it's for posterity and for the people back home. So we build morale and we also get the story told. The Marine Corps loves to tell its story, as you guys know. So what is combat art? It's reportage, it's facts and feelings, and it's truth with a filter. So let me explain. Reportage is it's a French word, and of course it's reporting. It's taking chronicling what's going on. So our drawings, our sketches, our paintings, they are telling the story. And it also comes from another word meaning to carry back or to bring back. And so that's what we're doing. We're bringing back the story of what's going on overseas in these troubling environments where our young soldiers and Marines are risking their lives. So we're also telling the facts, but with feeling. We're not just an observer that's casual. We're not just, in a sense, a camera. We are investing emotion in what we're doing. And when we create, it's going through the filter of our eye and through our brain and our emotions, and it's coming out in our style on the page. So it does have a filter, but we're trying to be as accurate as we can and to tell the story with as much truth and emotional impact as we can. So combat art is not propaganda. We're not here to do the recruiting posters, although I think that combat art, when it's done well, is a positive recruiting tool because it shows that we're trying to do something very positive out of something that might not be so positive all the time as an experience. But we're not here to just, prop up, some war, let's go, for no reason. We're not here to do propaganda. So I'm going to share some Army art and some Marine Corps art too, from World War II era. And this is from George Biddle. This is from a memo to the Army combat artists that were getting ready to be sent out. So he said, any subject is in order. If as artists, you feel it is part of war, battle scenes and frontline battle landscape, the dying and the dead, prisoners of war, field hospitals and base hospitals, wrecked habitations and bombing scenes, character sketches of our own troops, of prisoners, of the natives of the country you visit, the tactical implements of war, embarkation and debarkation scenes, the nobility, courage, cowardice, cruelty, boredom of war, all this should form a well-rounded picture. So it's not just combat scenes, it's everything. They were trying to get them to do everything. And then he says this, very interesting. He says, try to omit nothing. Duplicate to your heart's content. Express if you can, realistically or symbolically, the essence and spirit of war. You may be guided by Blake's mysticism, by Goya's cynicism and savagery, by Delacroix's romanticism, by Daumier's humanity and tenderness, or better still, follow your own inevitable star, which sounds very artsy for, so here's Delacroix and Daumier. So it was about the artwork and the story that art can tell, which journalism or photography can't always tell. And it's also following your inevitable star. Oops. Following your inevitable star is something that sounds rather artsy, but it's very important that all the artists you send out, they each have a style, they each have a filter they're seeing things through, and that's got to come out and gives a much better picture, a well-rounded picture than just, in a sense, photography can do. And so then he says, he sums it up by saying, we believe that our Army command is giving you an opportunity to bring back a record of great value to our country. Our committee wants you to assist you to that end. And this is from a PBS documentary that I really recommend you all go look at. Go to pbs.org and look up They Drew Fire. It's a wonderful documentary. It's a great website too, which shows World War II, the combat art programs of the services in World War II. And it interviews each of the individual combat artists years later and shows their artwork from that time period. It's a wonderful series. So the age-old question, why not just photograph it? Okay, even back then they were asking, why not photograph it? I mean, we got cameras, right? Why do we need to spend time sending artists out, you know, willy-nilly? What can they give us that the camera cannot? So I've got some pictures side by side here. Some of them are from one's, I believe it's Robert Capa, and the other is Tom Lee. And so you'll see two very similar scenes, and they just tell the story in a different way. Now the scene on the left is a photograph, but it was so altered in the darkroom accidentally that it's actually more of a creative image than just a photograph. But here on the lower right-hand corner is the drawing of the scene. This is Peleliu. And then, oh, here, okay, so here's another one, side by side, just two very similar photographs. This is David Douglas Duncan is the photographer, and then Tom Lee again is the artist. And you can see how very similar theme the painter has done to this photograph. They're both very powerful, but they both provide different things. And I think art can, in some ways, provide a deeper emotion. So let me read also this. I can get clear out my picture here. Okay. The combat photographer must snap his picture of an action as it happens. If he is busy taking part in the action, as he so often is, if it happens so fast he is unable to adjust his camera in time, if conditions are not good, the action is never recorded and the picture is never made. The artist, on the other hand, with his photographic eye, can take part in the action and then paint any moment of it from memory at his leisure. The painter can provide his own lighting. He can give a picture of any degree of intensity he desires. He can reconstruct a scene from whatever angle he considers most dramatic, centering attention wherever he wishes, and that's General Denig. And then down below, you'll see the a Time magazine review about this artwork they were reviewing. They were very surprised. It says the intimate, personal, penetratingly perceptive touch. Indeed, that is equipped to furnish a chapter that would have been missing where the camera exclusively relied upon. So there's an intimate touch. There's a perceptive, penetratingly perceptive touch that goes with artwork as opposed to just photography. And this is the finished painting by Tom Lee on Peleliu. It was terrible, terrible conflict, terrible battle, unseen violence before, especially for an artist, obviously. And some famous paintings too, where he shows the reality of life and death. So an expression of emotion, that's what we've been talking about. Combat art in many ways is an expression of emotion. And that's not to say that photography cannot do that, but there's a lot more emotion going. And this is the first painting I ever did for the Marine Corps collection. I'd just come on active duty, and I'd met this young Marine at Bethesda who was in the hospital and recovering. He'd been mortared at the government center in Ramadi. And so I did this, I took photographs, I sketched him, and then we did paintings. And this was the first one that I did for the collection. And he's coming in and out of consciousness because of his medication. And then just a few months later, I was running right near the government center through Sniper Alley or whatever, trying not to get shot at in the very government center that he had been mortared at. So that was an interesting connection. But you can see there's a lot of emotion. Another one of the first things I did was sketching wounded warriors at Bethesda and Walter Reed. This is Corporal Ingram. This is Neil Fristaglio. He was a double amputee, one of 5 in one event. They had 2 IEDs set up that blew up. And when they started helping the first guy that got blown up, the second one was ignited and it took 4 other men's legs off. This is another gentleman. This is from Victor Juhasz. You'll see him a little bit later. So there's a lot of emotional content. So we're not here to color code it or candy coat it, whatever. We're here to show all the stuff involved in war. This is a painting that I recently did for the museum, and it's of a Marine dog handler and her dog, and that's a wonderful, heartfelt thing. So it's not all, the after effects of war. It's also some of the positive things. Oh, here's another, I just put this in because this shows that not all artwork that is in these collections is realistic or pretty. Some of it is just downright expressive. It's just expressionistic, and this is a really graphic thing by a war dog by one of the artists. Okay, so a slice of life, that's another thing that we kind of do. There's a lot that goes on in war that is not combat. It's simply hanging out at a fob or in lots of boredom, downtime. And so this was on Thanksgiving Day back in 2006, and we had just come back from patrol, and these engineers had just come back, and so they were playing chess and reading and hanging out. And so we being the older Marine at that time, I had asked us all to give something they were very thankful for, and we went around and we each talked about what we were thankful for. It was very nice. And then they actually brought in some hot chow from the fob, the base. So we had Thanksgiving dinner, little turkey pucks, chopped turkey loaf with actual stuffing and stuff like that. It was a very nice evening. So another part of Slice of Life is things like lavatories, latrines, heads, whatever you want to call them. I have a whole series of these sort of scatological things because they make this very interesting drawing, the lighting coming in. Anyway, sorry about that. So reportage, we are drawing what we witnessed. That's the main goal of a combat artist. So this is a training environment, and we're just basically learning to sketch. We go out with our pencil or pens or whatever we're comfortable with, and you're very rapid fire trying to mark down what you're seeing. So this is pencil, and you can probably tell that I was going a mile a minute with the pencil tip here, trying to capture what was going on. And so here's me actually in Iraq sketching a captain before going out on patrol. And this is the actual drawing. This is another from that fob. So you just kind of, I always laugh that I'm kind of like Jane Goodall with the guerrillas. I go out and I'm kind of not one of the infantry guys. And so the more I kind of hang out with them and they see that you're not there to do any harm, they let you closer. So you get to know the guys and you start drawing them however you see them. So in a vehicle or an aircraft, everywhere we go, there's interesting things to draw. This is in a Humvee. And I thought, wow, what an interesting composition, all this cluttered stuff, and the guy's sitting in the strap there outside the turret there. And this is on an actual Osprey taxiing at Al Asad Air Base, and my sweat and the vibrations of the engines were causing my line to get very sort of crayon scribbly. Oh, on board ship as well. So this is actually when we traveled with the Osprey squadron over to Iraq. We went through the Mediterranean, past the Rock of Gibraltar, and I was sketching on deck, and then because there was no flight operations, and finished it up in watercolor. There's me right there passing. So get to draw sometimes during flight operations. It's very interesting trying to keep your sketchbook from blowing away, and it's also very hard to render as quick as you can when things are going on. But you kind of learn how to do that. Your eye gets very quick, and as you can see, we also try to put captions on what time it is. This is 1400, around 1400, 15 September 2016. So I try to get as much information just for history's sake for the collection. This is later on. This is this is on the baton as well. Okay. So drawing on the spot. If you see the PBS documentary, they'll talk about a little bit about drawing on the spot. And some artists say you can't do it on the spot, and others say, well, yes, you can. I've done it myself. The only time I was actually able to draw on the spot was in near Habbaniyah when they were calling in an airstrike on an insurgent house a couple 100 meters away, and we were on a rooftop, so I could sketch without being in any way seen or exposed. And so I was sketching while they were doing it. So these are the only sketches I did when actually in an environment where you'd see, well, you may not want to sketch because you can't stop the patrol and say, oh, hey, the lighting's perfect. Can we all stop so I draw you? It doesn't work that way. So you're mainly like a photographer going around a lot of times, but as soon as you can sketch, it's always best to get as many drawings as you can done. And so I was in Fallujah Surgical, or outside Fallujah Surgical, and they brought in a wounded young man, actually from my old reserve regiment, the 24th Marines out of Kansas City. He was actually all across the Midwest. So anyway, and they let me in the Fallujah Surgical. They did not let me take my camera in, but they did allow me to take my sketchbook in. So that was an advantage an artist might have. So I was really going as fast as I could. Once again, here they're prepping him. They're explaining to him what happened. He had a round hit his flak jacket and bounce off his knife and into his hand. And so it severed his thumb almost completely off. So here they are setting the table up, prepping his hand. So these drawings are very rough, you can see, but you can kind of see how his thumb was almost totally severed. I never did this in color. It would be graphic, of course, but not having my camera, I kind of unfortunately didn't have as much visual reference as I could, but it's still sketches can be very powerful sometimes. This is the actual surgery going on. And this is another Marine who was wounded, actually in a range incident, but he's a young recon Marine. And so I was struck by the youth of the kid and sort of almost Rockwellian composition and subject matter. Okay, here's another just sort of quick sketch on a ship when they're doing rifle range kind of things, getting ready to go out. So the Marines have to constantly stay in practice. Here's the ready room with the CO or one of the XO of the squadron. So here I am drawing in pen, just trying to get as quick as you can. You're trying to work on your dexterity and your hand and eye coordination. And so you practice all the time. Here's a little bit hurry up and wait. So a lot of the stuff we have is downtime. So you'll see a lot of combat art sketches that are guys sleeping, hanging out, doing things, because that's when you can actually get detail on your drawing or get more going on. These are some really quick sketches as well. This isn't from one of the airport sort of things in Iraq. I was able to sketch a lioness, which is one of the female Marines who is sent out in environments where the men cannot talk to the women locals. And so the women Marines are brought in to help communicate and lead them through the checkpoints and that sort of thing. And so I was able to do sketches and take photographs and then did a little color sketch of it later on. And I'm actually working in the planning stages on a painting today of the lionesses and the female engagement teams. And I was able to get back in contact with a couple of these ladies today, and they sent me a whole bunch of pictures and even some videos. So it's going to really help the project. This is one of the big paintings. We go to the war, we sketch, we take photographs, and we come back to the studio. This is a pretty big painting. It's several feet by 2 or 3 feet by 4 or 5 feet. It's currently in the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation offices at the museum. It's oil on canvas. I had a blast doing it because the lighting. I was at this little fob and I came out of the little quick. It was one of those big boxes that comes off of a ship. You know what I mean? Like anyway, a crate, a container. Anyway, and so that's where they had their chow hall. And then I came out and I saw these guys standing there talking and stuff and reading. And I saw the light coming through. And I had to get as many photographs. I also sketched them, and you saw a sketch earlier of some of the stuff. But then I painted this, and it's been one of my most sort of popular scenes because it tells a story that a lot of people relate to. Even if you were never technically in combat or an infantryman, you can relate to the fact that there's a lot of downtime and you're hanging out with your buddies and you're reading. You got the Marine Corps Times in the picture there. You've got Maxim magazine, and you've got some novels that were sent to the people, from the people, that sort of thing. So I did figure studies. Being an artist, it's always good. I love, some of the studies are sometimes more fun than the actual finished paintings because you're able to be a little bit more loose with your brush and your light. So this is the quick figure study, and then this is the more detailed in the painting. So I can actually kind of prefer the figure study in some ways. It's nice to have both for the curator, so it shows process and what's going on in the composition. So they are side by side, and they both have positives. This is the figure study for the young man reading Maxim magazine, and the finished. So they're different, similar. Oh, we also have sculptures. Several of the combat artists, myself included, do sculptures. This is one I did for the Heritage Foundation. It's in the museum. Oh, so let me talk a little bit about some artists that we have currently. This is Victor Juhasz. He is a well-known illustrator. He's done political illustrations. He's done courtroom reportage. He's been on the covers of the Rolling Stone. Lots of different stuff he's involved with in New York City. But he also has been involved with the Air Force art program and then the Marine Corps Combat Art Program. We went out in September of 2016 to the USS Bataan, and I was taking photographs of him sketching, and I did some paintings on this based on this thing as well. But he's got a real good talent for sketching as it's going on, right? So this is him sketching, and at the right, it's a what's it called, the landing control, or anyway. So and the guy on the left is he's the aft watch. So he's out constantly keeping watch to make sure no aircraft or ships are coming from the rear. So Victor's just very good at sketching. So let me show you a couple of his sketches. This is one that he did relatively recently. This was out at Quantico, and he's very good at rough sketching in, and it just becomes alive ultimately. And he puts a bunch of lines down that eventually form this really interesting drawing. This was a young officer in training. What they do is they go out to these, it's called Mout Town for military operations in urban terrain. And so he's out there. We stayed overnight, and we go out, and it was kind of getting cold. And but we went out with them. We followed them along through this little. It was a fake town. It's built for training, and so they have what do you call it? They were the aggressor, and then you had the defense. And so you learn both sides. The young officers, they have to learn how to defend a town and how to take a town. And so this is a young man set up. I think maybe he is in the defense. Yeah, setting up defensive position. And so they're always getting up and moving around. You're frustrated. You're trying to sketch them as much as possible, and then they move at the last moment. Just like any drawing class, the model a lot of times will move. And these guys they spend a lot of time setting up, and then they ended up having to move really quickly. But he was very fortunate to get a couple of good drawings of them doing the setting up. And I would recommend also Google Victor Juhasz. It's Yuhaz. He's got some great political cartoons, and he's also got some great combat art. And some of it is actually, I don't have an example of his that's a painting, but he did a painting that's very good based on the Mout Town. Okay, this is Richard Johnson, another great. He's a Scottish illustrator, and he's gone around the world. He's been not only to Europe, and he's been to the Ukraine. He's also been to Iraq, and I think Afghanistan as well. So he's a very good sketch artist. And there on the right is a drawing of me that I did of him while he was drawing the scene. Okay, so anyway, here's one of his great pencil drawings. And a lot of times Richard will paint in or draw with Prismacolor colored pencils. He used to draw exclusively with just any ballpoint pen that he found. He used to talk about how he'd take ballpoint pens either found or stole or whatever. But then we told him, look, you got to get some good archival pencils. And so he started doing these wonderful Prismacolors on large format pages. And it's just beautiful stuff. And this is not done from photographs. These are done while he's there. So he's just got this wonderful photographic eye. And the first time I actually saw him out in the field, I was wanting to follow him around and just prove that he was cheating somehow, right? But no, he's really, really good. So he's just got this wonderful photographic eye that he can draw, whether it's an aircraft or a person or an object. This is a very poignant picture of a wounded person. And we've all gone out and drawn wounded warriors and people who are, as you know, a part of war that finally I think our culture is really talking about. And but once again, you can see this wonderful. This is a very emotional piece. It's a very it's something. I mean, the photographs could be very emotional, but just the fact that this is done in blue, and it's the quality of the line and the quality of the just the image itself and the way the pencil is drawn. It's just a wonderful thing. So Richard is one of our great assets. Oh, this is another one. This is actually Kyle Carpenter when he was first wounded. He is a recipient of the Medal of Honor, and this is before anybody really knew that was going to be the case. And so this young man had thrown himself on a grenade to protect his comrades, and he survived. He, in the meantime, has lost his right eye, but he's recovered he's had many surgeries, but he is now looking pretty good and has been a very good spokesman for Marine Corps and what's going on. And so, and then we all have some great experiences going down and talking to the wounded Marines, the wounded warriors, and sketching them. And I think that gets to the morale part. We're not chaplains by any means, but I think that there's something about, like I said, the going to the person, spending time. For example, if you're taking a photograph of a person and you're just clicking and there's this mechanical object in front of you that's it's impersonal in a sense, right? And there's a sense of taking. And I'm not saying that photography is not right, or you know what I mean. It's a great thing, and I've seen some wonderful combat photography that is very powerful, but it is a mechanical object. And so there's something very good and intimate and human touch-ish about a drawing. And so it was a great morale builder for us, and I think also for the wounded warriors that once again, like I say, the government sees fit to send a person to take the time and then make these images for history, they'll be around for decades, hundreds of years, and they'll be taken care of in the collections. It's just it's a morale building thing as well as a record of history. Okay, so some of our uniformed artists, this is one, Colonel Craig Streeter. He's currently at VMI. He's in charge of the VMI Marine contingent. And he's also in his master's program currently at Hartford, which Victor Juhasz is a visiting professor for, and is my alma mater as well. I have my master's from Hartford in Connecticut. And this is a wonderful painting. I wish it was not blurry. And it's a night scene, very, very exciting night scene. Most of the time, most of our artwork is not exciting, but this is very dramatic, and I really like this piece. Okay, C.J. Bauman, Captain Bauman. This is him. He's actually in his actual life, he is a logistics officer, and he was an instructor here at TBS, and he sort of got us the gig to go visit the TBS, which is called the basic school, which is where all young Marine officers go once they've become officers. They have to go to a 6-month or so period of training where they learn all these different things. They sort of all have to become sort of infantry officers. So this is his day job, so to speak, is at this time was being an instructor, teaching all these young Marine officers how to navigate Mountown. And so they've thrown smoke there, and the young Marines on the left are getting ready to assault across. And in the background there, that's Richard Johnson. He's getting ready to sketch them as they go and take photographs. So this is CJ out in the desert somewhere, and that's one of his sketches at the right. Then the good part about TBS also is the fact that we get to talk to all the young lieutenants that are, they're the today's. We pass the torch to them, and they're carrying it forward, and also they like the fact that we also are drawing what they're doing. And this is one from Djibouti. This is where CJ and I think Richard Johnson were out together, and they're up on this hilltop and watching the scout sniper set up, and they had a lot of time and they could sketch and talk. This is on toned paper, which also is very interesting, because you can get a bigger range of what do you call it? A value range, and I think a little bit more intensity. This is Elize McKelvey. She's one of our uniformed artists. However, she now is just gotten off active duty, and she's she's down in South Carolina, I think. This is one of her interesting works. She was overseas in a peace environment, and they had, unfortunately, an Osprey went down, and several Marines were killed and injured, and it was some of her compatriots. She was a public affairs, she was a combat correspondent, and but was doing combat art as well on this deployment. And they didn't expect to lose anybody, but they did. And so she'll remember this for a long time, obviously. And we've got certain artwork that we can keep and tell the story about what happened. Here's another sketch of hers. She does a lot of ink. Her tag is ink stick art, and so she's done a lot of well, not ballpoint, but it's very similar. And we actually have a piece of silver point in our collection from her. Michael D. Fay, this is he's retired now. He's a chief warrant officer. He was my mentor and the guy that recruited me, and he was in Iraq and Afghanistan at the first parts of both of those wars. In 2002, he was in Afghanistan, and in 2003, 4, and 5, he went to Iraq. And I had seen his work online, and I emailed him, and the next thing you know, they're recruiting me, and I'm like, oh, and I talked to my wife, and the next thing you know, I'm re-enlisting at 38 to go out and be a combat artist. And then several months later, I was in Iraq. This is one of the most powerful works we have in our collection. This is by Chief Warrant Officer Fay. And this young Marine here sort of shows him a little bit in that the Tom Lee painting or drawing and painting earlier called it 2,000-yard stare is what the title of that is. A lot of people call it the 1,000-yard stare, but there's a certain look that these young Marines get and soldiers get. And yeah, and so this is the young man, Chacon is his last name. And he, the young Marine actually took his own life several years later. But this is something that his parents are very proud is in the collection, because it tells us a pretty deep story. But it's also just a wonderful portrait and a wonderfully rendered piece of artwork. Oh, this is another one by Mike Fay that I really like. He was out in Old Ubaidi in Operation Steel Curtain, and that was in, I believe it was in November of 2005, if I remember correctly. And he had a set of works, a set of photographs, and he actually had audio recording as well. And he went out with the Marines, and he was actually in combat directly. And several of the Marines were killed in an ambush house sort of thing, and he recorded their last moments and the aftermath with not only photography and audio, but with wonderful sketches. And this is a nice watercolor that it's a very poignant one. The Marine in the foreground is sort of privately crying a little bit, and he's lost buddies, and up in the top they're carrying one of his friends away. John Deckert, this is a former Marine we have, a civilian artist out in California, and his work is very, very powerful. It's colorful. It's semi-abstract. He uses a palette knife, and anyway, and a great guy. He's also very dependable to produce very good work, a lot of very good work. Here's one. Oh, this is a painting it's related to what I just shown you with Mike Fay. This is actually painted from photographs from that actual Old Ubaidi thing. So John Deckert wasn't on scene, but he was able to do a very, very intense, I think a very powerful painting. The young man on the right is one of the young Marines that was killed in the action there that Mike Fay had recorded. But John's paintings are just very powerful. Just the graphic nature of the paint and the color, and he's able to capture the emotion. They're just wonderful. Oh, I'm sorry. I've come to the end of my slideshow. I didn't mean to do that so quickly. I hope that's okay. I guess we'll have to.
No, that's wonderful. We're just going to get to have more time with question and answer.
Yeah, I guess that's good. And I can actually go back a little bit too if we want to see some of the
Please share
images.
what you like.
All right, so let me. Dun, dun, dun. All right. Okay. Oh, this is one by Victor Juhasz, by the way, that I mentioned, the illustrator. This is actually a little bit of tempera and colored pencil. So he's able to do both paintings and sketches. And this is Staff Sergeant or Sergeant Jason Ross. He lost his legs all the way up close to his torso. He's just sort of barely had enough to maintain life. And he's had a lot, needless to say, a lot of surgeries and recovery. And Victor and Jason have kept in contact with each other to this day. And Victor has several paintings and drawings about Jason. So I'd like to mention a little bit, like some of the paintings that were in that PBS documentary, which once again I really recommend people go see, because it tells how they were seeing things and experienced, and they risked their lives, especially in the wars we have now are very emotional, and of course we're caught up in them, and they're dangerous. Obviously, I don't mean to belittle them, but the World War was just gigantic and affected millions and millions of people. But I guess by showing some of these older World War II artwork, I want to say that my hat's off to these gentlemen who went overseas in these scenes. Oh, this is interesting. This is Howard Brody. So I'll tell you a little bit about this real quick, and then we can go to question and answer. But the Howard Brody was a World War II combat artist, and he has a wonderful touch to his pencil sketches. And he actually was able to, the only censored, I believe, drawing from World War II was the drawing of the Germans that were captured infiltrating American lines dressed in GI uniforms, and they caught them and they summary court-martialed them and then executed them. And he actually has a drawing of one of the German soldiers that was just freshly executed, and they censored it and didn't publish it because it was kind of graphic. But Howard Brody, years later in the early 80s, a young Victor Juhasz gets the gig to be a courtroom sketch artist at the Hinckley trial. And he got to meet Howard Brody, who was at that time now a famous courtroom artist. And so he became Victor's mentor. So we have this wonderful line of mentorship that goes on. Howard Brody to Victor Juhasz, Mike Fay to me, and several other the artists. So you can tell a little bit in Howard Brody's pen, what do you call it, his touch. You can see in Victor's line and rendering style, that sort of mentorship coming through. So not only philosophy about being a combat artist and eye, but hit the hand. And so you get a little bit of that touch back as well. So that's a wonderful sort of family lineage. So I guess we can answer questions.
When you're ready, the questions are coming in.
I am ready. I think I'm ready. I hope to be ready.
We got it. Which means we got this. We
can do this. We can do this.
We can. Before I get just a quick reminder to everybody, I see I got some questions inside the chat. I got them. I'm going to be asking them for you. But if you want to go ahead and use the Q&A button to send us in your questions, we're going to do our best to get to as many questions as possible. So let's get this rolling. And this is our first one we're coming in tonight is a really good refresher. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about this. Could you remind us what FOB stands for?
Oh, I'm sorry.
FOB. And why don't you go ahead and tell them a little bit about what a FOB is?
Certainly. So yeah, that's what we don't realize, that we talk in code and jargon. Yeah. That's the funny part, right? And the funny part is too, when we did some joint things with the Army, and so we each have different acronyms or the same acronyms for different things, and so it's a whole translator thing. But a FOB is a forward operating base, and usually it involves HESCO barriers, which are these big sort of dirt-filled canvas boxes with metal, supports. And so a FOB is kind of like Fort Apache. It's set out somewhere. It's quickly built, but it's like a porta-fort, and it goes out and they can put it on a roadside or out near an air base. So it's a forward operating base. It can be of any size too. The one where I was sketching the young Marines and painting the young Marines, it was not even a football. I mean, it was, not even, it was 20 yards by 10 yards, maybe 30 yards long by 10 yards wide. So they're just really small. This one was very small. And so it had a platoon or so of Marines. And so they sent me out on this patrol the first time, and I had my sidearm was my only weapon because I was an artist, and but they gave me this shotgun because they wanted me to have something, and it didn't have a strap. So I'm carrying this shotgun over my elbow, whatever you call it, and I have my camera in my hand with my shotgun. So I'm trying to walk along. What have I signed up for? Anyway, so yeah, FOB.
Wonderful. One of our guests would like to know a little bit more about your training as an artist. Did you have formal training in the arts?
Yes. So I have a degree in painting. So it's studio art with an emphasis in painting from Northeast Missouri State University, now called Truman State University. So there you go. I'm a Missouri boy. That's what they say, Missouri. It depends on where you're from, obviously, right?
Yeah.
So in St. Louis, they don't say Missouri, they say Missouri. So anyway, yeah, so I had my undergrad degree in painting, and then I got my my master's degree in illustration. And I got that through the GI Bill, the new GI Bill, which I would recommend highly. It's a wonderful thing. If you've got experience, if you've got active duty service, you can get not only your tuition paid for, but they can give you certain room and board. It was a yellow ribbon school. Anyway, there's a certain type of school where they will pay for your master's program tuition as well. So I was able to get my tuition paid for. while I was on active duty. It was a good deal.
I'm going to go ahead and read this question word for word here. This guest would like you to know, amazing work, Christopher. Thank you for not only sharing yours, but also educating us about combat artists and sharing the work of your peers, which I also enjoyed. Thank you. Your work will do so much profoundly. Tell us about the true cost of war and how this has affected you as an artist who captures this.
Oh. Wow, the war is still affecting people. Some of the young Marines and sailors that we sketched and we went out with on patrol. And I was very fortunate. I missed. I was always out in the dangerous areas, and we went toward the sound of the gun, so to speak. But I was very fortunate, never have to fire my weapon in anger, so to speak. But several of the young men that I worked with were killed. I was older. These young kids, but so the effects of it are still going on. And I myself, for some time, I was, you get home and you're back to civilization, but when you're driving, you're looking at the side of the road to make sure there's no, and you're like, wait a second, there's no IEDs in this area. Like, right, this is America. I saw the after effects on a patrol with some, not the first dead people I'd seen, because I'd seen a dead person as a missionary in Haiti. Anyway, but this was wartime death, but that will stick with me. I've never been able to draw that scene because it was, I don't know how to properly render that sort of thing. So what was the specific question?
I think that they were, I think you covered it. I think you got it.
It basically, it's profound. It's profoundly affected a lot of these young Marines and sailors and soldiers in ways that they're not even aware. And as an artist, like I said, the one parts that I saw that were really trying, I still haven't been able to record because I don't know how to. So it was basically a dead insurgent who had been left out by the locals because he wasn't an Iraqi. He was a foreign fighter coming in, and so they didn't bury him. And so, this is like a day or two later. And so it's in the desert. It's not a pleasant environment. And it's, and it was just shocking to see, still in the very position that he died in. So, you see on the human level, that's a person, right? And he's just sort of abandoned in the desert. So I've never been able to draw that or paint it in a way that I would hope it would be dignified. So you want to record it, but I'm still haven't processed it to really be able to record it.
That's very interesting. Thank you for that. Again, another guest, thanks you so much for your insight and really enjoyed seeing the work of you and your fellow artists. How are your sketches chosen for your finished paintings? Is there a review board involved?
Oh yeah, so as a combat artist, especially if you're uniformed, so if you're a uniformed combat artist, and there's at least one in the Army currently, there are two in the Navy, or at least, one is uniformed still. The Air Force has two or three. All of your work that is done, if you're a uniformed combat artist, is government property because it's work for hire. Yep. So the government owns it. However, there still is an accessions process. So not all of your work automatically goes into the collection. And some of the stuff when I left active duty and now I've come to work for the museum again, I've seen some stuff that's been in the collection. I'm like, wait a second, that was in that sketchbook. I didn't turn that in. And I forgot it was in the studio, and then they took it. And next thing you know, it's like, it's in the collection, but it's not finished. Anyway, but so not all your works get in necessarily. They have to meet a certain quality or value for the collection, a certain,
That's really interesting.
Yeah, so there's a panel that meets, and now I'm on that panel for certain things in the art. So, yeah.
Very nice. This guest would like to know, can you comment on the artwork of Colonel Waterhouse as it relates to Marine Corps history?
Oh, I wish I should have brought more of his work. I could probably Google it real quick. Anyway, Colonel Waterhouse is the first Marine Corps artist in residence, and so his work has influenced so many Marines. I myself was a young Marine, and I remember standing outside of like medical in the hallway and looking at these prints. He had this whole series. Originally he was commissioned to do a series of works about Marine Corps history for the bicentennial of the Marine Corps and the nation, of course. This was in 1975, coming up for 1976. And of course, the Marine Corps' birthday is in 1775. I think the Army beat us by, was it a
2
month?
days.
Yeah, not that long. Anyway,
not far.
So, anyway, darn. So his work is just, it was ubiquitous, and the Marine Corps loves to tell its story. So his work very well tells the story. And if you get a chance, if you guys are ever in this area, come up down to Quantico. His work is now, Colonel Waterhouse's work is now in the Marine Corps Combat Art Gallery. And there's a whole series of works on the Medal of Honor. And so he'll have a little portrait sketch of the person. And then there's a big picture, which is an illustration of the event based upon the medal's, what do you call it? The official transcript of what occurred. And so there's like 100 or so paintings currently in the gallery that are his works. But Colonel Waterhouse I got to meet him. I was actually one of the persons of the week for ABC with him and with Chief Warrant Officer Fay and Charlie Waterhouse. Charlie Grow, Charles Waterhouse, Mike Fay, and myself. And so we got to go up to Toms River, New Jersey, where Colonel Waterhouse had his studio and museum. And they interviewed us up there, and then pictured his work and that sort of thing. So I got to meet him a couple of different occasions, and before he passed away, unfortunately.
Excellent. Well, this next question comes from a lady that I know very well. She's one of my personal favorite artists. She works with us at the 1st Division Museum, Miss Anna Myers, and she would like to know what your favorite pencil brand for quick sketches.
Oh, favorite pencil brand. Let's see. Oh, I can explain some of the gear we take. I brought some of my gear. So this is a stool that I actually bought from Dick Blick Art Supplies, and I had it sent in a tube out to me in Iraq. It came via the mail.
Nice.
Awesome. Yeah, and it's a wonderful thing because it can fit on your pack, and then you can just flip it out when you're sketching. But so pencil wise, I like Prismacolors. Sometimes I do use them sometimes, but how do you pronounce there's the Stettlers, and then Faber-Castell. I just like your standard drawing pencils. So this is a really good kind. And I don't usually go that soft or that hard. I usually do 2B or 4B. And actually, good old-fashioned number 2 sometimes works very well. So basically, I'll show you my, this is my pencil bag kit thing. And so it zips up, and this fits pretty good in a pack. So you got everything you carry. So as an artist, this is one that went a couple times. It's every climb in place, as we like to say. And it's a laptop bag. And I actually do have my military laptop in it, but I never usually carried it out there. So, but you fill it with, for example, I keep a journal. Even today, I keep a journal, a big green monster, as they call it. And this I'll keep a record of like who I met that day, where I was, and for the curators, it really helps because, and then for me too, to jog my memory, because sometimes when you're creating a painting based upon sketches and photographs, it helps to sort of jog the memory about what was going on in the context of that day. And so, but basically everything you carry has to fit, in either a backpack or a bag like this. And so, a little metal clip for your sketchbook, pencil boxes, little watercolor things. Of course, I would take a watercolor. I even took some oils out to the original, my first deployment, and the scene of them playing chess or whatever at the FOB on Thanksgiving. That I actually started painting that in Camp Fallujah, back in my little hooch, as we called them. Yeah. And it was like an improvised studio. So I had sketched them and I'd taken photographs, and I actually started that painting on a panel that I'd stretched canvas on. I got the panel from the Seabees that were local on the base, and they cut me some wood panels, and it was kind of a joint service thing right there.
I like that.
But as far as pencils are concerned, number 2s will work very well, but yeah. I go to Michael's or Utrecht, and
number 2s are a classic. You can't beat them. We do have a lot of questions coming in. So again, I'm going to try and get to as many of these as possible. No, not at all. I just want to make sure I get to as many as possible. How many combat artists does the Marine Corps usually have on active duty, and in what kind of unit are they assigned?
Okay, so during the height of the war, there were two of us, Chief Warner Safay and myself, who were actual combat artists on orders to be combat artists. So we were through Marine Corps University and the History Division, the United States Marine Corps History Division, and we were on active duty at Quantico. Mm-hmm. And so we were technically part of the History Division, which is a reserve unit mobilized. Now our uniformed artists are stationed at Quantico, but they're not combat artists officially. As far they have a secondary MOS as a combat artist if they're an officer. We're still trying to get the enlisted side combat artist MOS. And ultimately, my goal is to make us once again an actual MOS, so that we can recruit like we did in Vietnam. We could recruit from art schools and bring in the best talent and have them uniformed and trained. Because even though we have some wonderful civilian artists, it's a little bit more difficult logistically and in all other ways to send civilians. Because as a Marine, you're equipped and armed and trained and all that other stuff. And it just helps the Marines be a little bit more at ease that you're not a liability. Yeah. They know you're trained.
No, and that's actually a perfect segue. We had another guest who was interested in Vietnam art and wondered what type of Vietnam art was in the collection, or any prominent artists who painted Vietnam or drew sketches.
Well, even so, every year we have a combat art symposium, and of course this year ours was virtual, but we have a big contingent still of our Vietnam combat artists. And so, if you want to look up some, you might be able to Google several of them, but you can go to requestaprint.com. requestaprint.com, and that's sort of where we have the Navy collection has their work on that. I think maybe the Army collection does too, but I know the Marine Corps and the Navy's collections are on there, and you can look it up by artist or by era. So there's World War II, Vietnam, Global War on Terror, that sort of thing. So James Fairfax is one of our Vietnam artists, and it was interesting. And he comes over. So he's local. He comes to our symposium every year. Colonel Peter Michael Gish, you can look up Mike Gish, but he should be on that as well. He's up in, I believe it's Maine, Block Island. Anyway, he's 94. He was, his actual service goes back from 1946 all the way. He served in Vietnam as a combat artist, and he served in Somalia, put right after the Gulf War, as they took him back onto active duty and sent him out as a combat artist. So his ribbons are from all the way from the Pacific era to 1993. But I would go to that website and look up those gentlemen.
What was the name of that gentleman again?
So Gish, Gish, that's Colonel Michael Gish, James Fairfax, Jim Butcher, Richard Yaco, Yaco, and some of these gentlemen are Googleable. They still have work that's they're doing privately, and they might even have their work.
And then this next question actually comes from a Vietnam veteran. So first and foremost, thank you for your service. Welcome home. And he would like to know, in your presentation, you showed a slide with David Douglas Duncan. And he produced a photo book entitled I Protest. And this guest would like to know, is that the same David Douglas Duncan in both World War II and Vietnam?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, the one I showed was Korea. So his career spanned both. Oh yeah, and he's known more. It depends on who you're talking to. The Vietnam era guys will remember. Oh yeah, and they'll point to the second work. But his career goes back all the way to the Korea. He was both. Yeah, wonderful art, wonderful photography. I mean, we always talk about combat art, but David Douglas Duncan, man, his work as a photographer is brilliant.
So this guest would like to thank you for sharing all of these works of compassion, grace, and poignant beauty and truth. I could not agree more with that statement. It was very moving. We hold you in the highest regard, and wondering, what do you like to draw when you are not doing combat art?
Well, see, when I was young, what I drew when I was young was either dinosaurs or Revolutionary War or World War II. I drew, soldiers and Marines and stuff. So I'm kind of doing what I love to do as a kid, but for years in between enlistments, for example, I was a portrait artist, and I lived down in Florida and I did landscapes. I love doing a good landscape. I love painting trees and color, and you can, with a landscape, you can move things around and it doesn't matter, and you can, you know what I mean? Whereas if you get the nose wrong on somebody, they want to sue you, basically.
Oh, no, I never thought of that.
Portraiture is very difficult.
The pressure's on. I never thought of that. All right. So we have 2 more questions, everybody. So we're going to get through these last 2. If you have any other last minute ones, feel free to send them over. But I believe these will be our last 2 questions this evening. With women serving in combat roles, are there any female combat artists? And I believe you featured one of them this evening.
Elize McKelvey.
Yeah.
And also there is an Air Force, a classically trained Air Force combat artist. Why am I blanking on her name? I just talked to her in the symposium. She was a great guest in our symposium. She does sculpture as well as paintings and drawings. So the Air Force is really doing well right now. So yeah, there are. And Elize McKelvey is just getting better and better. And now she's off pursuing, she's going to be doing some more graduate studies. It's too bad she's not on active duty anymore, but she's going to continue to contribute to the program as a civilian.
Excellent. Hold on, let's get down here. So we do have 2 more. So I'm going to add on this last one because it's a question I had for you as well. Okay. So across all branches of service, how many artists are currently serving in the military? And that's a great question. Are the Marines or the Air Force really the only ones who have combat artists? So what we need to know here is, does the Army have a artist in residence?
Yes. Sergeant First Class Kurt Loader is currently, I think he just got back from deployment. We actually interviewed him at our virtual art symposium in September. Time flies. Anyway, he was overseas, and so he zoomed from overseas, from Kuwait. It was awesome. But he is currently the Army's artist in residence, and I think he's the only official artist that the Army has. So I guess I need to make a distinction between a combat artist and an illustrator or a graphic artist. So for example, Elize McKelvey is a combat correspondent / graphic, what do they call it now? Graphic arts. They melded all of the MOSs into one. It used to be a combat illustrator, combat photographer, combat lithographer, that sort of thing. So she was doing graphic and photography and graphic art. So there's a lot of those. For example, at DINFOS, the Defense Information School in Fort Meade, the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, all of them send their graphic designers and their artists there, but they're not technically combat artists. So a combat artist or a war artist is an artist that goes to experience something in a reportage, experience war or training, and depict that with fine art using traditional methods. So it's not necessarily graphic design. It's usually not computerized, although Richard Johnson has this really cool little tablet that reads from the pen and then actually produces it digitally while he's drawing. It's really kind of neat. But so a combat artist is different. So the Navy has 2 civilians and a reserve naval officer as their artists. I was one of the Navy civilian artists between the Marine Corps and then now as the artist in residence. So there's 3 Navy artists. There is at least 1 Army artist, and there are 4 Air Force Reserve artists. Army, Navy, Air Force. Oh, and there's also, well, there are some Coast Guard civilian artists, but I don't know if the Coast Guard has any uniform. So it is something that needs to be addressed. It would be great if the services would go further to create, the MOS again, so that we can keep this alive, keep it going as an actual occupational specialty. Well, but it's a small group.
Yeah. Well, hopefully someday when we're able to host everybody back at our home here at Cantini Park, we'll be able to have some of these artists and yourself here to visit us and get to kind of hear from everybody. That'd be very interesting. Go ahead. Sorry. We
could get Kurt to come and share his artwork he did from his deployment. That would be cool.
Absolutely. I think everybody out here is saying, yes, Laura, please. And we'll work on it, everybody. We'll work on it. And then we have one final question for you. And this is actually a question I had. So thank you for asking this question because I had this one too. Yesterday, Christopher and I were chatting off about some of our favorite artists, Butler, Malden, and one of my favorite World War I artists, which is Clagett Wilson, Marine.
Yes.
Marine.
Yeah,
those are some of my favorites, but this guest would like to know, what are your favorite artists in just art, all of the art?
So
All,
I
general
am
art.
a naturalist and a realist. So I do appreciate the modern art movements. They've actually informed our artwork now. We're in a very pluralistic era. So now as an artist, I can borrow from modernism and classical. And so it's a wonderful time to be an artist now, but I'm still a really realist. So my favorites are John Singer Sargent.
Yes.
If you ever get to go to Boston, go to the library. I mean, there's some, his stuff is amazing. One of the big paintings I'm doing still for the Navy is a big 10 feet by 6 feet painting of air operations on the USS Bataan. And but I was inspired by seeing the John Singer Sargent Gast. If you ever get it, it was going around, a wonderful painting, and it's all done very sketchy. When you're up close to it, it's beautiful. And you stand back, it's an experience. And that inspired me to do the big painting. So John Singer Sargent. A sculptor would be Charles Sargent Jagger, however you would pronounce it. He's a British World War I era sculptor. And then, of course, the number one painter of all time. It's not Bob Ross, although.
Oh, okay. Veteran, so that would be
for Christmas. I always get Bob Ross things, and so.
And also a veteran. Bob Ross, a veteran.
So basically on the USS Ronald Reagan, by the way, on one of their closed circuit television channels, they had Bob Ross playing 24/7 because it's very relaxing. So anyway, but my favorite artist of all time is Norman Rockwell. I know that's, I don't know, apple pie in America or whatever. Actually, his work is quite powerful later on, as some of his later work as well. He addressed some very serious social issues. But if you ever get a chance to go up to Stockbridge, Massachusetts, the Norman Rockwell Museum, oh my goodness. Or if you get down to near Fort Worth, there's the Boy Scout Museum. And one of Norman Rockwell's first professional jobs was to do art for Boys Life. So when he was a teenager even, he was doing artwork. And so his career for doing artwork for the Boy Scouts lasted for decades. And there's some wonderful originals there. So, but I can't not say Leyendecker, J.C. Leyendecker, and Howard Pyle too. So there you go. But Norman Rockwell overall, his process, you can see in his surface, the color, the composition, the narratives. It's whew. So if that makes me cliched, then so what?
Yes, great choices. Great choices.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank everybody so much for joining us this evening. Before I send you off, I very quickly want to wish everybody a very happy Thanksgiving. And hopefully we will be able to see you at our next scheduled Date with History. Registration for that program is not open yet. It will be opening within the next week or so, so keep an eye on that. It will be on January 14th. We won't see each other for a little while. January 14th, and that is going to be getting us ready for the 30th anniversary of Desert Storm. We'll have a few presentations about that, but that's coming up in January. So we're going to be hearing from author Jim Corrigan, and he's going to be presenting on his new book, Desert Storm Air War. So learning a little bit more about the air campaign, that'll be very interesting. Like I said, registration for that event will be opening soon, but if you'd like to stay in the know, shoot me an email and I will get you signed up for the First Division Museum events e-listing, so you will get emails on all the latest programs going on here virtually at the First Division Museum. Christopher, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm going to give you a very virtual round of applause on behalf of everybody here because they can't applaud you. Again, if you have any questions for Christopher, you wake up in the middle of the night, you got a question, send them my way. Christopher and we'll talk. I'll get an answer for you. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great night. Happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays, all of it, and we'll see you again. All right, good night. Thank you, Christopher.
All right, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
It was wonderful.
All right, have a great night.
You too.